Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the independent police watchdog has begun an investigation into how officers found the body of a man at his home a month after he was reported missing. On the eve of the exam results, there are calls from teachers for more clarity over changes to assessments.
A longer exam in one sitting is not going to do these children any favours. It will put them off and it may well lower attainment, particularly for children who are from more deprived catchments.
We'll be putting that to the Education Secretary, John Swinney. Also on the programme, there's a row over Glencoe, not the picturesque piece of Scotland, but the waterproof jacket. It's a big night for Laura Muir as she prepares to run in the 1500 metres final at the World Athletics Championships. And creating the Fans of the Future, the opera aimed at babies. Good evening. The independent police watchdog has begun an investigation into why officers found the body of a man in his home a month after he was reported missing. An 18-year-old schoolgirl from East Lothian has been jailed after admitting carrying out an acid attack on a fellow pupil. It's now the fourth year since school exams were reformed under the new system of Curriculum for Excellence, and pupils across Scotland are preparing to receive their results tomorrow. But the implementation hasn't been smooth, with concerns that teachers are facing a much bigger workload and pupils are sitting too many assessments. Well, in a moment, I'll be putting those points to the Education Secretary, John Swinney. But first, Rebecca Curran reports.
One of Scotland's oldest schools, the Royal High School in Edinburgh. It inspired teaching around the globe, promoting Scotland's worldwide reputation for excellence in education. Today the school has moved away, rebuilt, transformed. What then of the education system?
Teachers' leaders say Scotland's new curriculum for excellence in schools is so vague they're struggling to understand it.
Teachers are being given new guidelines about the curriculum for excellence.
Big changes are to be made to new secondary school qualifications, barely 3 years after the reforms were introduced.
It was happening slowly, but there could be no doubt.
Teacher Olivia Drennan says workloads have been excessive. She joined growing calls for less assessment in the fourth year of secondary school. The Scottish Government listened and pledged to scrap some tests in 2018. But she was surprised to learn that will lead to longer exams.
Every year we have an issue with kids at the moment leaving exams earlier. They find it difficult, and the boys in particular, to concentrate for that length of time. Given that we know that that is the case, a longer exam in one sitting is not going to do these children any favours. It will put them off and it may well lower attainment, particularly for children who are from more deprived catchments.
The aim of Curriculum for Excellence was to help young people gain the skills needed for life in the 21st century, enabling them to become confident individuals, responsible citizens and effective contributors to society, while also closing the attainment gap. But concerns still exist around implementation.
Okay, this is the original document produced in November 2004. It sets out 4 purposes for education,
One of the architects of the new system still believes it was the right thing to do, but thinks some changes were made too soon.
We introduced exams that were not markedly different in what they did from their predecessors, that were working actually quite well. But the workload consequences of introducing the new examinations have been absolutely enormous and have had a very serious effect on secondary teachers' morale and indeed on their capacity to pay attention to arguably more important things in Curriculum for Excellence, such as decluttering the curriculum in S1 to 3.
The Scottish Parent-Teacher Council broadly welcome Curriculum for Excellence, but are still concerned about over-assessment.
We've got a cohort of young people who've really been under the cosh, way too many assessments, and the mental health of our young people has been suffering. We've had parent groups contacting us to say that they are employing counsellors to work with their young people because they're so stressed.
Radically transforming Scotland's education system was never going to be easy, but the First Minister says it is a government priority. At the chalk face, there's still hope and a solution.
What I'd like to say to John Spinney, really, I think his heart is in the right place. I think he genuinely wants to close the attainment gap. He needs to find a way of listening to ordinary teachers on the ground so that policy actually is implemented in a way that doesn't have these unforeseen consequences.
Well, the Education Secretary, John Swinney, is here. Mr Swinney, then, can I put to you the thoughts of the teachers and the parents and the pupils that overall, I think people feel that the concept of curriculum for excellence is sound, but 7 years on, the implementation is still flawed?
I think the evidence is that Curriculum for Excellence has been a very successful reform to be undertaken in Scotland, and that's the view of the international community, because Curriculum for Excellence is an internationally renowned curriculum for us to have taken forward. What's important is that we get the detailed operational aspects of that correct, which is why I've made the changes that we are proposing to make in the forthcoming year to reduce the assessment burden on young people, because Eileen Pryor makes a very fair point in the piece that you've just shown about the burden that over-assessment can have on individual young people. So those changes have been made. They'll have a consequential effect on teacher workload, and it'll actually enable teachers to concentrate much more on learning and teaching than concentrating on the assessment part of the work that's undertaken in education.
But what about those unforeseen consequences? Because we've heard from teachers that some of the assessments which are going to be scrapped, they're not going to be scrapped for all pupils, that the exams are, as we heard, going to be longer, and that this has an effect on boys particularly, and from pupils from deprived backgrounds.
What we've got to make sure is that as we reduce the assessment burden, we're still confident in the strength and the integrity of the examination system, and obviously that will be a key factor in the discussions that we have tomorrow when the exam results are published, because it does our young people no service whatsoever to not have qualifications that are strong and valid and full of integrity, and that's what we must concentrate on in our examination system. Now, what's important is that we get the balance correct between course assessment, which is the work that's done during the year, and a final examination. And the balance of significance of assessment during the year and examinations will remain the same within the exams that will be changed in the forthcoming year. And what that means is that young people have opportunities throughout the year to demonstrate the education that they are gaining and how that contributes towards their qualifications.
And what about the bigger picture? You said Curriculum for Excellence was internationally renowned. I don't need to tell you that Scotland has been slipping down the international league tables. You have been in power for 10 years. Are you addressing this? When are we going to see Curriculum for Excellence finally overcome the flaws and bear fruit?
Well, at the first sight of any issues of performance in the education system in 2015, the Scottish Government acted immediately to strengthen the focus on improvement within education, particularly around literacy and numeracy. And that's been the theme of what I've taken forward since I became the Education Secretary, to make sure that we strengthen the foundations of Scottish education, that we give young people the opportunities that they are entitled to, and that we support the teaching profession to be able to concentrate on learning and teaching. Now, that's what's driving the agenda that we're taking forward. But there's an even greater priority within our education system, and that's to remove once and for all the persistent attainment gap that has existed between young people from more deprived backgrounds. And it's my personal determination in the course of this parliamentary term to do as much as we possibly can to remove that.
And very briefly, that slide down the international league tables has been halted?
Well, what we're concentrating on is improving that performance, strengthening the performance of young people in literacy and numeracy, and equipping our teachers to ensure that they can do so.
John Swinney, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Nicola Sturgeon has admitted that the circumstances which led to the former MP, Michelle Thompson, quitting the SNP whip has not been easy for the party. Last week, the Crown Office said that Ms Thompson would not face any charges after an investigation into property deals. She's called on the SNP leader to apologise for the way the situation was handled. Here's our political correspondent, Nick Hurtley.
A couple of years ago, they were colleagues on the campaign trail. But Michelle Thompson says Nicola Sturgeon didn't listen to her side of the story when a row broke out over property deals. Police had been investigating transactions linked to Ms Thompson's company. Prosecutors said last week there would be no criminal proceedings, and now Ms Thompson wants an apology.
I would like her to help me understand some of the stresses and tensions she had at the time when it happened and what was behind her decision making. I don't believe it was done maliciously. I don't believe that for an instant. It could have been that, she panicked.
Nicola Sturgeon launching a scheme to encourage new female leaders. She'll support young carer Charlotte over the next 12 months. The SNP leader says Ms Thompson's situation was difficult.
I regret very much that we were confronted with a situation where one of our newly elected MPs was facing serious allegations. And, I appreciate that what followed on that, the investigation that took place, was not easy for Michelle Thompson. It wouldn't have been easy for anybody in that situation. But, I think people would also appreciate that it was not a particularly easy situation for the party to be in either.
Now there could be talks on Ms Thompson rejoining the SNP.
We'll have that discussion if Michelle wants to have that discussion with her. This is about looking forward, not looking back.
In a statement tonight, Ms Thompson repeated criticism of media coverage of the investigation and said she looked forward to hearing from Nicola Sturgeon soon. McCurdy, reporting Scotland.
Now, when you hear the name Glencoe, you might think of one of the Highlands' most beautiful landscapes. Of course you would. Later this evening, Laura Muir goes for gold at the World Athletics Championships in London. Kerdini San, well, staying with sporting achievement. Hundreds of athletes left Glasgow this morning, heading for the Special Olympics in Sheffield. Now, every arts organisation wants to win over a younger audience, but Scottish Opera have taken that to new lengths.